suggest you my victim is. Kalia, would you like to try number 1? Thank you. Everybody doing okay with these? What's that? Okay, so here's my piece of advice if you're confused. Write the code to do it to the first guy. So if I said to you, set the first test score to 0, what code would you write? Write it down. Everybody knows how to do it. If I said set the first test score to 0, how would you do it? You would say what? What would you say, Jake? Test score, if I said set the first guy, you've got that array, test, don't look. So I've got test score sub 10. If I said set the first guy to 0, what would you do? What's the first guy? Which one's the first guy? Test score sub 0 equals 0. That's it. Change that guy to, change 0 to an I, pop it into a for loop. That will do all of them. That's it. So if you think how to do the first one in your head, and then change it to a variable, and then put it in a loop, it'll do it for all of them. Do you see what I'm saying? That's a good way to start. Okay? So there's 10 of them. So how would you, okay, so let me ask you this. If I ask you how to, okay, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just did the same thing to him. If I asked you how to set the first element in that array to 0, what code would you write? What's the first element in that array? Test score sub 0, right? So do me a favor. Come in here and write test score sub 0 equals 0. Just do that. I want everybody to process this, okay? No. After the 4. Keep what you've got. So go right here, put a return, and write test score sub 0 equals 0. Does everybody agree that would set the first element to 0 first? Now, does that make sense to you that that sets the first one to 0? Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that 0 to x, and that then is basically the equivalent of saying test sub 0 equals 0, test sub 1 equals, do you see what I'm saying? So if you can talk yourself through the 0th element, pop it into a for loop, that'll work for all. Does that help? Okay, good, thank you. Does that help? So if you're not sure, so let's go to the next one. How would you print the first, I'm not going to give it away. How would you print the first element? If I asked you what code you would use to print the first element, what would you do? C out test score sub 0. So now if I want the whole array to be printed, change the 0 to x or index or I don't care what you change it to. Make that your for loop, and that works for the whole array. Does that make sense? You want to try? Will you come? Who's gonna? Which one are you? You want to try it? You want to try printing them all? I don't want to put you on the spot. If you don't want to, just say no. Yes, Ryan? Okay. All right. So do the same thing that she just did. Come up here and just print the first test score. Here's my array. I need an S here. Can you fix that S for me? If I just wanted to print test score sub 0, okay? Okay, so now come here, return. I just want you to write the code to print the first test score. So C out what? Okay. Just to print the first test score, it's C out test score sub 0. We all know that, yes? Whatever the name of the array is, the 0th guy. Brackets, it's getting used to the syntax is tricky, okay? Put a 0 right now, just for 0. Okay, semicolon. Okay, so does everybody agree that this prints the first element of that array? Now, if I want to print the whole array, let's do something different besides x this time. Change it to I. A lot of times we use I for this. Now, put this loop ahead of it, the for I equals 0, I less than 10. And now those two lines are equivalent to C out test score sub 0, C out test score sub 1, C out test score sub 2, C out, blah, blah, blah. And it can work, I'm only doing 10, but it'll work for 1,000,000. Question? So, if I'm working on the whole array, okay, thank you. All right, so let's run this guy. So here, all right, so does everybody see what happened here? When I declare an array, what happened? 10 guys were allocated in space. And what were those guys called? Test score sub 0, test score sub. So when I did that one line, 10 spaces were allocated, and they're all blank or have garbage in it at this point. When I get to this gets set to 0. This is less than 10. So what happens first? Test score sub 0 equals 0. I need a semicolon. Can you add a semicolon? Okay. Then I bump x to 1. So 1 is less than 10, so test score sub 1. So basically, let me get a good marker. First step is space got allocated. Right here, space got allocated. And the first guy's called what? Full name, though. Test scores sub 0. That's how I refer to that first guy. The next guy's called what? Test scores sub 1. This is the element, this is the index. Blah, blah, blah. The last guy is called test scores sub 9. Okay, that's all that happened here. Now what happened here is x is 0, x is less than 10. So when I first do this first line, what happens? 0 gets put there. Then I come up and I bump x to 1. Is 1 less than 10? Yes. So test score sub 1 equals 0. So it's just all happening behind the scenes, but 10 lines of code are being executed. There's no miracle. Each one of those lines is being executed. Does that make sense? Okay? So now when I get to here, we can run this. This will actually print. It's not going to be pretty. And I could call the index whatever I want. I use I a lot. Some people use IX. So what should print? 10, 0. Now, if I want it on separate lines, I have to do it. It does what I tell it to do. It doesn't do anything, Okay? Now, this is so useful to me, I'm actually going to make this a function. So I'm going to make a function called print. I'm going to let it, it'll work for anything. Oops. And I'm going to keep using this guy. And I'm going to pass in the array. The names don't even have to match. And this can be ARR. So I can pass these arrays, and it's going to be really powerful for me to be able to do all this stuff. And so if I want to print the array, what am I going to pass it here? I'm going to say print ARR, and what am I going to pass it? What array am I trying to print? I need to prototype it. I have to do it here. Make a job and get a little bit. Up here. Ah, that wasn't the error. It's just this. Oh, I think that might do it both. We'll see. ARR. I didn't declare. Changed the wrong thing. I didn't need the error message. Okay, so anyway, now that array, I'm going to use it all over the place. Okay, so now I want you to write the code to input all the values. Now, what's the tip that I gave you? What's the tip, Jake? So write the code to input the first value. So what would you need to do? You need to statements. What do you need? C out, C in, and then you need to put it, right now it'll be 0, and then pop it into a for loop. So go ahead and try it. So write the code to number 3. Input all the values. So this time I'm going to ask the user to enter the array, the test scores. Who thinks they can do this? Stefano, you want to try number 3? And all these can be functions. We can work on functions more next week if that confused you. Yeah. Inside main. Yeah. That's what we started with. And this will work for any size. You know what I mean? And if I used a constant, then I don't need to put the number all throughout too. Okay, so he's going to write the code now. But can you prompt too? Add a prompt. And he needed brackets now because he has more than one line. Same rules. This is nothing new, right? We have more than one line. It has to be a compound statement, okay? Does this make sense? Does everybody have this? So now will you run this for me? And what's going to happen? It's going to do what? What's it going to do when it runs? Ask me for 10 test scores. And each one of the, so go ahead, it should run. So now it's going to ask him for 10. We could have said enter, he's going to just enter 10, any crap, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to ask for 10 test scores. He's entering them manually. If I now called print test scores, it would print whatever's in the array now. Does that make sense? So you see the power we have now with these arrays? Okay, thank you very much. All right, number 4. Double all the elements in the array. So that means that I decided the test scores needed to be doubled. Ha! In your dreams. So write the code to double every test score. So what's the tip that I gave you? Try just doing the first one. Jennifer, you want to try this one? So how do you double the first one? What would you put? Test score sub 0 equals test score sub 0 times 2. Change that to an index, pop it in a for loop, and it does all of them. Does that make sense? It's all in the syntax here. We all know how to double. It's a question of where do you put the times 2, right? You're not sure if it goes inside the brackets or outside the brackets. So the syntax is funky. Okay, hold on. You're doubling. But you can save that one. Why don't you do it? Why don't you copy and paste one and put that on the next one, number 5, okay? As well. Okay, and fix the first one first. So that's +1, okay? And then you need a semicolon, right? So she did 5 by mistake. Increment is you take each guy, add 1 to it. She's going to double it, which is going to take each guy and multiply it times 2, which is double, right? Don't make it harder than it is. Okay. All right. Perfect. This is 4 and 5. Is there another way that we could have done this step? Yeah. We could have said test score sub I plus plus. Make sure the plus plus is outside of the brackets. If it's inside the brackets, it'll bump I. That's something else. Okay? That'll really screw things up. All right? Okay, who thinks they can do number 6? Who thinks they can do number 6? The same tip is not exactly going to apply. But you know how to print an element, so how would you print them in reverse? Hunter, do you think you know how to do it? So what's the last element in the array? This is a little tricky. What's the last element? 9. Right? Semicolon. And then you're going to continue to go so long as you get to no, we're starting at the 9 and going back up, but it needs to be greater than or equal because otherwise you won't do the last. In this case, do you see why? Does that make sense? Okay. So then he's just going to print it. Does that make sense how we can print it reverse now? Does that make sense? Okay. How about number 7? Thank you very much. How about number 7? Who thinks they can do number 7? This is a little trickier, but I think we can do it. Who thinks they can do number 7? Any volunteers? I don't want to pick somebody for this if you're not ready. Who thinks they can do number 7? Sum all the values. Jillian? Okay, that's all right. But don't grab that loop. Grab the loop above, right? Yeah. I mean, we could go in reverse, but that just wouldn't. Yeah. That makes sense? That's the question we started with, right? And then if I want to compute the average, can you stay up there and just finish average? So after the loop, average equals what? In this case, I know how many I'm doing, so average equals what? I or 10. Yep. That's how we started the class. Now we know, thank you. Number 9's a little trickier. We'll work on that on Tuesday. Okay? My advice, print this out blank and try it again. You know what I mean? Print it out blank. See if you can do it. I'm really stepping you through this.